The Knowledge: How to Rebuild Our World from Scratch, by Dartnell. Narrated by John Lee. Introduction. The world as we know it has ended. A particularly virulent strain of avian flu finally breached the species barrier and hopped successfully to human hosts, or was deliberately released in an act of bioterrorism. The contagion spread devastatingly quickly in the modern age of high-density cities and intercontinental air travel, and killed a large proportion of the global population before any effective immunization or even quarantine orders could be implemented. Or tensions between India and Pakistan reached the breaking point, and a border dispute escalated beyond all rational limits, culminating in the use of nuclear weapons. The warhead's distinctive electromagnetic pulses were detected by defense surveillance in China and triggered a round of preemptive launches against the United States, which in turn spurred retaliatory strikes by America and its allies in Europe and Israel. Major cities worldwide were reduced to jagged plains of radioactive glass. The enormous volumes of dust and ash injected into the atmosphere reduced the amount of sunlight reaching the ground, causing a decades-long nuclear winter, the collapse of agriculture, and global famine. Or the event was entirely beyond human control. A rocky asteroid, only around a mile across, slammed into the Earth and fatally changed atmospheric conditions. People within a few hundred kilometers of ground zero were dispatched in an instant by the blast wave of intense heat and pressure, and from that point on most of the rest of humanity was living on borrowed time. It didn't really matter which nation was struck. The rock and dust hurled up high into the atmosphere, as well as the smoke produced by widespread fires ignited by the heat blast, dispersed on the winds to smother the entire planet. As in a nuclear winter, global temperatures dropped enough to cause worldwide crop failures and massive famine. This is the stuff of so many novels and films featuring post-apocalyptic worlds. The immediate aftermath is often, as in Mad Max or Cormac McCarthy's novel The Road, portrayed as barren and violent. Roving bands of scavengers hoard the remaining food and prey ruthlessly on those less well-organized or armed. I suspect that, at least for a period after the initial shock of collapse, this might not be too far from the truth. I'm an optimist, though. I think morality and rationality would ultimately prevail, and settlement and rebuilding begin. The world as we know it has ended. The crucial question is, now what? Once the survivors have come to terms with their predicament, the collapse of the entire infrastructure that previously supported their lives, what can they do to rise from the ashes to ensure they thrive in the long term? What crucial knowledge would they need to recover as rapidly as possible? This is a survivor's guidebook, not one just concerned with keeping people alive in the weeks after the fall. Plenty of handbooks have been written on survival skills, but one that teaches how to orchestrate the rebuilding of a technologically advanced civilization. If you suddenly found yourself without a working example, could you explain how to build an internal combustion engine, or a clock, or a microscope, or, even more basic, how to successfully cultivate crops and make clothes? The apocalyptic scenarios I'm presenting here are also the starting point for a thought experiment. They are a vehicle for examining the fundamentals of science and technology, which, as knowledge becomes ever more specialized, feel very remote to most of us. People living in developed nations have become disconnected from the everyday processes of civilization that support them. Individually, we are astoundingly ignorant of even the basics of the production of food, shelter, clothes, medicine, materials, or vital substances. Our survival skills have atrophied to the point that much of humanity would be incapable of sustaining itself if the life support system of modern civilization failed. If food no longer magically appeared on store shelves, or clothes on hangers. Of course, there was a time when everyone was a survivalist, with a far more intimate connection to the land and methods of production, and to survive in a post-apocalyptic world you'd need to turn back the clock and relearn these core skills. What's more, each piece of modern technology we take for granted requires an enormous support network of other technologies. There's much more to making an iPhone than knowing the design and materials of each of its components. The device sits as the
Sample complete. Ready to continue?